All of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
Hello and welcome to All of Time and Space. We're getting very close now to the end of Season 6 and we'll be taking a look at the Space Pirates. Ian's just taken an opportunity to do a little bit of maintenance on the time lash. He's giving it a thorough deep clean. Some of the tinsel's become a little bit matted, so it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. Anyway, let's catch up with where we are in the story. The charges detonate in a series of silent explosions and Space Beacon Alpha 1 disintegrates into lumps of metal. The space pirates have discovered a new source of precious argonite. General Hermack of the Space Corps diverts his V-ship to investigate and arrives in the Pliny system in time to witness the destruction of another beacon. Determined to trap the pirates, he leaves a squad of guards on Beacon Alpha 4. And shortly afterwards, in the beacon's computer bay, the incongruous shape of a blue police box materializes. Suspected by the Space Corps of being pirates and then pursued as spies by the pirates themselves, the Doctor, Zoe and Jamie risk asphyxiation in the vacuum of space, execution and explosion in their attempts to unmask the mastermind behind the thefts of argonite. And we'll be back after this.
Oh dear.
What's wrong?
Well, I don't think we're quite where I expected, but never mind, this looks very interesting.
Interesting, a piece of old machinery.
Yes, I've never seen a computer quite like this before, Jamie.
It looks like some sort of control room.
Yes, but what does it control?
Well, I think we'd better get out of here before somebody catches us.
Good idea. There's a door here.
No, Zoe, I meant in the TARDIS.
Jamie, stop worrying. There's obviously nobody here.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, this machine is programmed to operate by itself.
Yes, but what does it do?
Well, I'm not sure, Zoe, but I think we're on an unmanned spacecraft in a fixed orbit. We're too far away from anywhere to be a weather satellite. Let's see what clues we can find through here, shall we? What's that? Nobody here, eh?
Oh, no, what are we going to do? The TARDIS is in there.
There's only one thing we can do. Run!
Well, maybe next time you'll listen to me.
If there is a next time.
And welcome back. And for this episode, we have been joined by Kev F. Sutherland. Hello, Kev.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure. Kev is here to talk about the penultimate story of this season. But before we get on to that, Ian.
Ooh, now then, let me think. If we're not quite ready for the actual episode yet, it must be... Oh, you know what, Kev? It's time for you to face the mind probe.
Oh no, not the mind probe.
You are authorized to use the mind probe. One.
What? No, not the mind probe.
I can't do it. I can't do the voice. I cannot do the voice.
That was lovely.
I'm getting real Wallace and Gromit vibes there. That's really good.
I'll do me. Oh, no, not the mind probe. There you go. That is how I would react to the real mind probe.
Cracking mind probe, Gromit.
Yes, Kev. So, you'll need to cut this bit, Mark. I can't remember the spiel now.
The spiel? Come on. It's not been that
Satisfy
long.
the challenge of the mind probe, and at the end of the episode, you will be returned to your customary time and place. But if you fail in the quest, my leering henchman, Castellan Cockram, is itching to toss you vigorously into the time lash.
I am braced.
Now, what we've been doing recently is we've been going out on a limb. We've been looking at the words in the titles and going off on tangents based on those words. This particular adventure, we've got some fairly uninspiring Route 1 kind of words. So I came up with a brilliant idea the other night while I was on the metro back from work. I was thinking, what if I retitle some classic Doctor Who stories from all eras of the show in my own unique style and make you guess what actual story I'm talking about?
Okay.
There are 6 questions between you and a vigorous tossing into the time lash. Are you ready for question 1?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, I'm going to read you my title of a Doctor Who story. I want you to tell me which actual Doctor Who story this is. Question 1 is Doctor Who and the Number Mumblers.
Doctor Who and the Number Mumblers. Number Mumblers? Is it the Dominators because they're misspelling denominator?
Oh, I love your thinking. That's very elaborate and actually a lot cleverer
Can I guess?
than mine.
Am I
Go on then,
allowed?
Mark. You can have a guess.
Would it be Legopolis?
It is Legopolis! Oh, it is Legopolis!
Of course, they do sit and mumble numbers. They do.
I'm gonna. Do you know what? I'm going to let you work as a team on this because it's.
Okay.
Yes,
It's
I think
just-
that's going to be necessary.
It's
Does that mean
just
I've got
a
to
bit
toss
of
myself?
fun.
Oh no, let's not go down that rabbit hole. No, okay.
Just put a tumbleweed there. Question
Yeah.
2. What story is this? Doctor Who and the Another Doctor Who
Well,
Ooh,
that
that's a
sounds
tricky
like
one.
the Two Doctors.
is bang on the money. That's 2 for
Absolutely
2.
superb.
Okay, it's going to get very
But
tough.
that said,
Yeah.
from New Who, it's also the next Doctor,
Well, it
could
and
have
it's
been, yeah.
also the one with the bi-generation,
I
in,
have-
and it's also Once Upon a Time, whatever that one was
Yeah,
called.
I've written
And
all
in fact,
those
I think
down
it's
because
6
you-
or 7 episodes with 2 Doctors in these days. You can't move for them.
I know, you're tripping over them, aren't you?
Good job you're not naming episodes from comic strip versions.
Oh God.
A Doctor appears with another Doctor. Easier to name a comic where a Doctor doesn't appear with another Doctor.
And let's not even start on Big Finish. Oh my good lord.
Are you ready for question 3? Question 3, or title 3, because it's not a
bring
question.
it,
It's
yes.
a title.
No.
Question 3. Doctor Who and the Giant Prawn.
Doctor Who and the Giant Prawn. Is that the Macra Terror?
No.
Ooh, I think I know. Shall I, shall
hang
I
on.
jump in?
Terror of
Oh.
the Vervoids? No. No, I don't. Giant prawn. I know I'm seeing a giant prawn. Oh, it's not. No, snake dance is a snake. It doesn't look like a giant prawn. I mean,
I would love to see the giant prawn take the place of the Mara in that story. I think that would be amazing.
And I'm also seeing the Loch Ness monster, but it's not. It's not that. Oh, tell me.
Can I
Again,
come up with a
Mark,
guess?
over to you.
Could it be the debut of K9 in The Invisible Enemy?
How right you are.
Oh,
What a great story and what a marvellous season that was.
oh yes, it really was.
Yes.
It's part of the Imperial phase, the Graham Williams years.
Imperial. We're going with that, are we?
We absolutely are.
We're going to have fun in 20 years' time when we get
We
around to
are,
discussing
whenever
those
we get around
stories.
to it.
Can you tell me why you call it the Imperial phase?
Because I am a huge fan of the Graham Williams era. So that
And you call it
spans
Imperial
seasons-
simply in flattering the Graham Williams era.
I
Do you,
just
do you have a
think
name
it's-
for? Do you have a name for the Christopher H. Bidmead and
Ooh,
John Nathan Turner?
Oh well,
series?
I mean,
GCSE science era.
it's they've vacuumed out all the fun, haven't they? It's very serious, very somber, and a bit sort of pseudoscience-y, but yes, yeah.
Features
it's,
number mumbling, as we've already
It does. It
established.
really does.
You say pseudoscience. I don't see what's pseudo about charged vacuum emboitments. Everyone does them at school.
Oh yeah. When I was a kid, I was always looking out for charged vacuum emboitments.
That's what we're calling it, is it? All right. Question or title 4. Which classic story is this? I say classic, that's a complete misleading. Which story from the modern era is this?
Ooh.
Doctor Who and the Crayons of Evil.
Oh, that's Fear Her.
That's another tick.
He's
to you,
got
sir.
it.
He's
Oh.
got it. Okay, number 5. Doctor Who and the Uncomfortably Long Goodbye.
Oh.
That's David Tennant's final episode, isn't it?
It is, it is.
13 minutes of
It is.
epilogue in God, what was it called? Oh God, what's it called? The Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre did it. The End of Time.
Yes,
Part 2.
that's right. I love the way that your train of thought there was like exactly the same as mine when I was trying to remember the name of that episode.
I have to wiggle my hands to remember
Yeah,
things that I've done
yeah.
with the Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre, and we have done The End of Time twice because I was asked to do it again for some American or Canadian TV station or something.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else wanted us to redo it so they'd have a higher quality picture clip. That's interesting.
While we're
So
on the
End of Time
subject of the Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre, I told my 10-year-old son that we were getting you on as our next guest, and he's a big fan of the Beano, and I know you're a comics guy, and I thought, wow, he's not a huge Doctor Who fan. I think he finds the idea a bit scary at the moment.
How old?
But he's 10. But he thought I thought he might enjoy the puppets. So I thought, I remember the 12 Days of Christmas. That was really funny last time I saw that. So I thought I'll play that to him. Unfortunately, I'd forgotten the bit about you talking about Rose Tyler being a prostitute, but I think that went over his head. That was fine. It was really good. He enjoyed it.
There's a lot of inappropriate material in the socks. Very little appropriate material.
No,
as I recall.
In Kev's
Anyway.
defence, Rose Tyler was a prostitute because when she left Doctor Who, she went
She
on to
was.
be in the Secret Diary.
That's right.
So that's just factual.
With Matt Smith.
With
Was
Matt Smith.
in that?
He was,
Yes, he was.
he was one of the customers.
One of his earliest roles, wasn't it?
He's a lucky boy, and then he gets to spend 3 years with Jenna Coleman.
I know.
Oh, all right, let's knock this nonsense on the head. Final title for you to guess: Doctor Who and the Chess Mess.
The Chess Mess. Oh, is that Silver Nemesis?
Yeah.
No, not so.
Oh.
No, I mean, Nightmare in Silver.
No, it isn't.
Because they
You were
do
very
play
close.
chess.
You were very close with Silver
Yeah,
Nemesis.
he was. Could it be?
Oh, hang on, chess. Well, there's the chessboard in Five Doctors, and there's chess in Nightmare in Silver, and there's the toy maker plays chess, doesn't he?
I mean, probably.
He might do in his spare time.
Who knows? Who can be bothered to watch that again to find out?
In case you didn't know, we weren't the massive fans of the toy maker the first time round. It was.
I don't know. What's the chess?
Well,
mess?
so
Can I?
Oh, go on then, Mark. Off you go.
Is it the Curse of Fenrir?
It is the Curse of Fenrir.
Oh!
You can see my thinking.
Hang on. I'm trying to remember the chess in the Curse of Fenric.
Find
We play the game
winning
once
move.
more, Time Lord.
Do they play chess?
White
They do,
wins.
That's the whole wrapping up.
That's
That's
the
the whole
whole
thing.
conclusion.
Do you know what's going to be a really big problem with a lot of this is that you may have watched many episodes more than... I mean, I think, having watched Curse of Fenric, I think 3 times in my life, I've watched it more than most humans. And I
Yeah.
watched it... When it was shown on... there was a cable channel showed it. It was one of the
Yeah,
UK
I mean,
played
you must
showed
be
it
significantly
originally.
younger than Ian and I, so we'll give you that, because obviously
I watched
us
it
being
live.
old
I watched it live at
codgers-
the time. I've got it on VHS, recorded off screen. I've still got the VHS tapes, but of course nothing to play them on anymore. And I watched it recently on that cable channel. I don't remember the chess. I'd clearly looked away for that bit. I thought,
Clearly.
oh, okay, oh, it's Nicholas Parsons. It's from Nicholas Parsons. And then when he's not on, go and do something else, I suppose.
That's a,
Unless he plays chess, in which case I really
And
wouldn't
that's
pay
why
attention
Doctor
at all.
Who got cancelled.
it's your fault. Yeah, no, it's so clearly the takeaway from this quiz, which I'm happy to say you've passed with flying colours, is that you need to
Absolutely.
go away and watch the Curse of Fenric quite soon. I would say.
Again. Oh, God.
It's excellent. It's got
No, I
nonsense that
was
are
very
after.
impressed by it. It's one of those many stories that you can see what the writer would have liked if only the budget had allowed, or the on-location recording in that case, because some of the sound is quite abysmal. Some of the sound sounds like you've just taken a home tape recorder of the day out into a field and asked Sophie Aldred to shout from the other side of it. It's really
That
quite
was
poor.
very much the budget at the time, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if they had. But although Marquez does a very good job of sprucing them up when they release them on Blu-ray these days, so maybe you should check out the Blu-ray box set.
Yeah. Maybe life isn't as short as I thought it was.
Well, our life is all a lot shorter because we've all recently been watching The Space Pirates. Isn't that right, gentlemen?
Oh, good Lord, yes.
Well, you say all. This is a very interesting quandary one finds oneself in, because Mark very helpfully sent me a link, and I thought, well, what's he sending me a link to this Vivo thing for when I have the wherewithal to watch The Space Pirates on the big screen in my lounge? And so that I did. Or did I? Well, no, I didn't. I have rather foolishly watched all 4 episodes, again, not for the first time, of The Pirate Planet, starring Tom Baker, written by Douglas Adams, and of no relevance whatsoever to today's exercise.
I mean, to be fair, you probably had a much better time than Ian and I did.
I certainly did, already with my Mr. Fibuli references, but none of that.
Well, so...
These notes can go out the window. No, these notes can walk off the end of a gangplank. That's what they can do.
The positive spin to put on this is that at least one of us has watched a complete Doctor Who story that actually exists.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject, and this may get me fired from the podcast, I don't know.
Oh, here we go.
I didn't watch all of it.
Oh, Ian.
And I'll tell you my thinking. It wasn't that I didn't have time, it wasn't that I didn't want to, but it occurred to me that if I watched some kind of recon of all of this, I wouldn't have anything left. I'd have seen it all.
You'd be spent.
And I wanted to hang on to that little bit of...
Okay.
I say little bit of ignorance. I've got quite a lot, as regular listeners to our show will be all too keenly aware. So I've watched episode 2 that's on the iPlayer, and I delved into the recon of episode 6. So
the reconstruction, for those of us, myself included, who have not watched the reconstruction that I know everybody else is on board here and listening has watched. So the reconstruction is made how, from what, and what's it like?
Okay, so in their infinite wisdom, the BBC decided they would wipe videotapes starting in the 60s and running right the way through till quite late on in the 70s because of restrictions on how many times you could show the same story, and videotape was very valuable, so it was a resource that could be used again. They wiped the original tapes, so luckily some of those stories were saved because they were transferred onto film and sent off across the world for other broadcasters, and they've been retrieved. But there are still 97, I want to say, missing episodes that no longer exist in the BBC's archive. Now, luckily, nerds like us, back in the 60s, recorded, using audio recorders, the soundtrack of these programmes as they were broadcast. Some very basic, just by holding the microphone up to the TV speaker. Some risking death by actually removing the back of the TV and connecting their recorder directly to the audio output of the TV. So, which means that we have audio of every single Doctor Who story, which is something to be thankful for. So the way that it works with recons is that back in the day, producers and directors would want a record of their work, so you couldn't just lob someone a VHS tape because they didn't have VHS tapes back in the 60s. So they would hire a gentleman called John Cura to take photographs of the TV screen at regular intervals, and they would then be given to prospective employers as an example of their work. So John Cura would snap away at the TV screen. So more of a 90s thing now, but fans, particularly Loose Cannon, were the big exponents of it. They would take those snaps, photos, and match them up with the audio. So you're effectively watching a kind of a slideshow of photos combined with the audio. And some of the later ones, they'd include things like computer graphics and things to try and make it a bit more visually acceptable to a modern audience. But yes, so that's how these things work, and they are kind of around online if you know where to look.
Yes. No, I confess I have watched a few recons. In fact, recently watching the animated versions of Troughton episodes, I've preferred the recon sometimes to the animation because the animation is very much a different visual style and it distracts you, whereas the still image, which just will hang up there for 10, 15 seconds, doesn't distract you from the audio. And does it a service, as I'm sure it did with the Space Pirates that I have yet to watch.
Well, you say that.
let me just. I'm going to hold my hands up to something here. I grew up reading Doctor Who magazine, and I started in '87. I read it all through the '90s, and you literally couldn't open that magazine without, at some point on almost every page, reading the expression John Cura telesnaps. And I'd nod knowledgeably. I knew what they were. It never occurred to me that he was doing them to create a visual record on behalf of those staff. I thought he was just some nerd who was trying to make his own version of the complete Doctor Who by photographing the TV every 10 seconds.
Am I not right that he started doing it independently and then offered it to the TV?
That's right. He devised
actors would quite liked it because they then got reference to shows that they'd been in, especially if they'd been in costumes and stuff and there was no shots on set.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And he actually developed a system in order to get the sort of the perfect photo of the TV screen, because I imagine it's quite tricky to, especially on TVs back then and the state of technology back then, it must have been quite difficult to get a good crisp image.
Because there was never like a reflection of a man with a camera in any of those pictures that he took, so he must have been really quite good.
More signicathode, there wasn't a horizontal stripe across them, which is what you get if you point a film camera at a cathode ray screen. Doesn't happen. Try to explain it to the kids today; they won't understand it because our TV screens don't work like cathode ray screens worked, and our cameras don't work like film cameras worked. So it doesn't happen anymore.
So yes, that's how we're able to still, in inverted commas, watch these stories.
Well, it's how you were able to watch this story.
Oh yes, yes.
But Mark, tell me about your very first encounter with the Space Pirates. What was the medium? What was the year? What was the verdict?
Well, I didn't have the Target novel because I was a very bad fan. I didn't have all of them. I think it was one of the later ones that came out towards the end of the Target run, if I remember rightly. So the first I would have known of it, I think, my friend gave me a perfectly legal CD with a load of MP3s on it, and they consisted of all the missing episodes, so I would have listened to the audio with a bit of linking narration from one of the stars. I can't remember who it was now. So that would have been my first experience of it. I didn't actively hate it. The Space Pirates has got a bit of a reputation as not the greatest story ever shown. It has to be said.
You astound me. We'll
I
delve
know.
into that more deeply. But Kev, what about you?
Well, I seem to remember, because I did get Doctor Who magazine every single week, from when it was a weekly to then when it was a monthly. And so when they would be recapping those stories with the screen grabs, that would have been the Space Pirates that I would have seen. Was the Space Pirates ever included in one of those VHSs? There was a couple of them called Lost in Time, which had just the one random episode of the Celestial Toymaker and the one random episode. If Space Pirates was one of those, then I may have watched that one random episode. But of course, being divorced from the entire 6-part story, I probably made no sense of it and didn't keep it as a memory.
So it was released as part of the Troughton years. They used to do those VHS box sets of the Troughton years, the Hartnell years, etc. And as you say, when DVD became a thing, they brought out a box set called Lost in Time. So all the orphaned episodes were released that way. So,
right, if it was on VHS, I had it. If it was on DVD, I didn't, because I've still got all the DVDs and I haven't got that.
Ah, okay.
I mean, sorry, I've still got all the DVDs that I had. I do not have a comprehensive collection of every DVD.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. So, Kev, what's your history with Doctor Who? Are you an old school fan, or have you...
Yeah, my history is obviously watching it as a child, and I do go back a long way. I mean, you flattered me earlier, probably before we started recording, suggesting that I might be younger than you guys, but I think I'm significantly older. My first Doctor was John Pertwee.
Oh, good Lord.
And so I begin with John Pertwee when I'm 8 years old. And in fact, I was starting to grow out of Doctor Who during Tom Baker. And so when it comes to the Christopher H. Bidmead and John Nathan Turner stories, that's when I finally gave up the ghost, because it was not an interesting programme anymore for me. Then I came back in for Peter Davison because I looked like him at school. I had my hair is not now as blonde as it was then, but my youthful looks and his were comparable. He's a few years older than me. And so I would sit round my fellow students and say, oh, you've got to watch this. This is a great programme. This used to watch this. And we'd sit and watch it, and I'd sit there stony-faced, and I'd have to turn to them and say, no, I promise you, it used to be great. Unfortunately, for me, the Davison and then the Baker, and to a slightly lesser extent the McCoy years, which I think saved it, they were painful for me because, of course, when you're 8 years old, John Pertwee, not only the most exciting Doctor Who for a lot of people, but also it was the most exciting thing that was on telly. There's nothing else on telly in 1971-2-3 which has got helicopters and stunt men and guns and car chases, let alone having sea devils and Daleks and all the rest. So, as a viewer, that was my history. And then I come back in 2005, all guns blazing, and I've loved the show in its revived state ever since. Professionally, I came into Doctor Who with Doctor Who magazine, with a series of comic strips. I've been doing parody things in a few fanzines, and then the editor John Freeman started using my strip, The Comic Assassins, which begins in Doctor Who magazine in 1988 or 89, must be 88, because we're doing Sylvester McCoy's penultimate series, I think.
Okay.
We certainly do A Curse of Fenric, which, as far as I am concerned, didn't have any chess in it, but I'm told it did. And once Sylvester McCoy's series had finished, they kept the strip running, and then finally, in 1992, realised that... Well, no, we changed editors, that was it. In 1992, we changed editors. And so Doctor Who Magazine's involvement with me and my friend Steve Noble, who co-wrote it. I co-wrote it and drew it. He co-wrote it. And then I came back with Doctor Who Adventures in 2010, when I did a series of illustrations in the Matt Smith years. Big double-page spreads with lots of Daleks and Cybermen and Matt Smiths.
Fantastic.
And stuff. And, of course, the Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre, my comedy act, have appeared as Easter eggs on such things as the War Games and Horns of Nyman and a few others.
All the greatest stories in Doctor Who, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty well. And we're on the Five Doctors. We are on the Five Doctors as an Easter egg as well. That's back in the day when Easter eggs were a slightly different concept. They were a thing that you had to click a certain part of a DVD's screen to access, and then you would get bonus material. Easter egg now means something else, doesn't it? It means sort of fan service smuggled within the body of an actual show.
Well, now they're transferring them all onto Blu-ray. They've rather helpfully just got it down as DVD Easter egg now in the menu, so you don't even have to search for it. It's literally just there in front of you. You just click on it. So at least that way it means that your work is finding a wider audience. But
if my work is still included, I'm not entirely sure it is. I think they will have new Easter eggs of their own. Don't know if we're on the Blu-rays.
So I was reading DWM when you would have been doing some of the comic strips. Can you remember any of the stories you did?
We did the 5 Doctors to coincide with the VHS release. We did Curse of Fenric live. We did the Deadly Assassin, because I remember John Freeman had to send me what I assume was a bootleg VHS at the time of it, because it just had the Deadly Assassin written on the side in pen, because the VHS release was still to come. Oh, I'm struggling to remember what other ones we did. Those are the ones that I can only remember because I've seen the artwork for them recently. But we were doing them every issue or every other issue for 3 years, so we must have done a dozen.
Wow.
Cool. Was it the one where they were sort of, I'm going to say, gently mocking that particular story?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I do
it's a dense page. We drew a dense page with about 20 panels on the page, and they're not done in a very cartoony style. I was doing them copying the person off the screen. I find them quite uncomfortable and cluttered to look at, but a couple of the gags are great, because basically we just did a gag in every panel.
I remember exactly,
yeah.
And I remember the 5 Doctors, and I remember the Deadly Assassin, and oh boy, the Welsh Master and all that sort of thing. And I've got to tell you, as I'd have been, early teens maybe when I was reading them. I thought they were hilarious.
Oh, bless. Well, that was what we were going for. We were going for cheap gags and the fun of usually mocking Adric, if that was we do something with Adric in, because we take the piss out of Adric in one of the storylines. Oh, well, maybe that's the Curse of Fenric. Maybe that was a play on Adric and Fenric. I don't know. Lost in the mists of time. And another thing that's not going to help us in the rest of this programme is I have an abysmal memory for a great deal of stuff. I know that doesn't help being a fan of a 60-year-old television programme.
Well, I think this is going to go really well. We've got someone who can't remember a story he didn't even watch. We've got me who watched the one extant full episode of it. Mark, you're going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting.
I think I am, aren't I?
But we really should stop dancing around the edges and get straight on in there with the space pirates. So, over to you.
Yes. Well, this has the rather dubious serial code of why. And I think that's quite appropriate, really. Yes, where to start? Well, this was commissioned at a relatively late stage because they had a couple of stories that fell through. There was The Prison in Space, which was all kind of Benny Hill style antics with ladies in miniskirts being prison wardens and stuff.
Sounds great.
Yeah, Ian's very upset that one went. And also there was
I should imagine Pat Troughton was quite upset that one went as well.
Yes.
He'd have been all over
yeah, I mean,
one. My God. Oh, we need to go for another retake.
No, he was complaining that he was too tired, so there's no way he could have been chasing those ladies around. So, the other one was The Dream Spinner by Paul Wheeler. So they both fell through. So it left quite a sizable gap, which meant that the Crotons got brought forward in the season to an earlier slot. And then Bob Holmes came up with this idea for the Space Pirates, and then they had this little story called The War Games, which filled out the rest of those episodes for the rest of the season. It was something I think Terrence Dicks was quite keen on the idea of having a sort of a Wild West story transposed onto a sort of space, sci-fi version of that, if you like. Looking at positives, I think some of the model work in this is absolutely superb. The spaceships look really amazing. There are existing clips of those. The reason why episode 2 exists is because it was filmed in 35mm film. That's the first time they'd done that for a Doctor Who. So they decided that should be kept because of its importance. So the film library was separate to the video library. So all the other episodes got junked, but this one was kept.
Is the complete episode on film?
It is.
That's very unusual. So the previous episode is studio bound. Is the second episode so different in content, like they're entirely on location, that they would do it in film?
No, that's the thing. It used to be film on location and videotape in the studio. But I don't know if this has any bearing on it, but episode 1 is the last story to have been recorded in Studio D at Lime Grove, which was where the programme first started with An Unearthly Child, which was well known for being a tiny, tiny studio that was really not up to the job. So that was the last recording made there. And then episode 2 was the first one to be recorded at the brand spanking new BBC TV Centre.
But on film?
Yes. I don't know why they chose
in
to do
studio
that.
on film.
On film,
That's
yeah.
very interesting, because there are some bits of other episodes that are in studio and on film.
Yeah.
What Pat episode was I watching recently? Was it the Mind? No, it's not Mind Robber begins on film. Something else begins on film. They've got like one scene in the TARDIS. They're on 35mm.
Oh, could that be Web of Fear?
It's Web of Fear.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's Web of Fear.
Web of Fear, which has a significant amount of film as well because of the locations. And curious. I know a lot of people listening know this stuff, but the great thing will be I'll have read this in Doctor Who magazine 30 or 40 years ago, and it's all gone, so I can be told it anew.
Apparently in the Curse of Fenric, there's this wonderful kind of climax that's predicated around the game of chess. So
No.
there's a new fact.
What a
for you.
shocker, yeah. Yeah, I'd like you to cast your mind back to The Wheel in Space. Do you remember we did that with the lovely Dylan Reese, the Emmy Award-winning Dylan Reese?
The Emmy Award-winning Dylan Reese. I can remember.
Hello, Dylan.
I can remember talking to the Emmy Award-winning Dylan Reese, but
Yes.
I can't remember
Now,
too much about The Wheel in Space.
One of your main complaints about The Wheel in Space was that there was an awful lot of time spent titting about on a remote spacecraft.
Right.
With not very much going on.
Yeah.
Now this, I feel, goes like one step further, because you're a good 15 minutes into the first episode before the TARDIS crew even appear on screen.
So one of the facts I've gleaned about the story through sort of 8 minutes frantic Wikipediaing some 20 minutes ago was that certainly for episode 6, the TARDIS crew were busy filming the War Games. So all their stuff was pre-recorded. Now, as I say, I've only just watched episode 2 and I've seen the recon of the final episode. But I'm wondering if this entire story was in some way engineered or certainly produced to kind of keep the main cast, free to do other stuff.
Yeah.
And therefore, the majority of this story is the guest cast, is the subplots involving piracy. And therefore, I put it to you that this doesn't make the same egregious mistake of lots of depending on titting about in remote space stations. It takes that format and it elevates it into an art form of treading water.
I mean, it certainly does that, yeah. I think also another a factor that comes into this is, as we've remarked on in previous episodes, Troughton had been very, very grumpy about the fact that, as far as he was concerned, they were all being absolutely worked to death, and had managed to negotiate better terms so they weren't doing quite so much all the time. So that probably would have also factored into why they had significant amount of time without the main cast. Yeah, so this episode 6 is the first time since Mission to the Unknown in the 60s that an episode was recorded without any of the main cast in studio.
I can find it very easy to see how Troughton would have these problems. I mean, before him, Hartnell had burnt out because he was a not very well man being made to work on a 6-month-long soap opera these work schedules of filming a half-hour episode every week. It's very bizarre. Nobody works in that way now, apart perhaps from EastEnders. And Pat had recently just done The Enemy of the World, where he's having to do twice the work already. The Mind Robber gets then stuffed by Fraser Hines being sick. And of course, if someone's sick, they have to do a science fiction workaround, which is fine and dandy, make him into a cardboard cutout and another actor. But there's no room for manoeuvre.
No,
in
and that first episode of
production
that story
schedule.
is the three main principal cast members as well. So it all hangs on them. So they're having to work themselves.
Exactly. From all of the Troughton that I've seen, and all of the, looking at those 6-month-long series, they are so intense, especially on the part of the three leads.
Yeah, they were filming just about a week ahead of broadcast. It's absolutely mad. You can't imagine it now, can you?
It's such a fly-by-wire, seat-of-the-pants way of doing it, and it is, you think about what it would be like, and you think it must have been absolutely terrifying, which is why occasionally they try something like this, which is basically the 1969 equivalent of something like Flatline, say, where they've pre-recorded the Doctor's bits, and they can just slot them into an otherwise, fascinating story in a way that is deliberate and paced deliberately, rather than, William Hartnell's phoned in sick again, can we knock him out and leave him in a cupboard for 25 minutes this week and give all his lines to the other guy who's then got to go and learn them. So I think I'll be honest, and again, I only saw part 2, but I found it utterly charming.
Yeah, I find that trying to envisage their working practice and their working schedules and compare it to the way things are done today is something we learn a lot from, because they were essentially doing live TV. Yeah. Whereas now when we do things with single camera, and do you remember in recent years when people had to film around COVID, we've seen lots of behind-the-scenes trickery and jiggery-pokery. Well, what they would have done with old-fashioned Doctor Who if you had to work in those situations, I can't imagine.
I mean, at least they had a nice big TARDIS console room, so they could have all maintained a perfect 2-metre distance at every turn.
Don't start me on the size of TARDIS console rooms. I'm still wondering how Ncuti Gatwa is going to fill his... He must have a hell of a charisma to try and fill something which appears to be the size of a football stadium.
Yeah. But that's a very interesting... to go back to what we were just saying, Ncuti Gatwa... At the time of recording, listeners, we're like a couple of weeks away from the start of season. That's the first Ncuti Gatwa season. These were all filmed 2 years ago, 18 months ago. So you see how we've come away from this kind of record it the day before it's being broadcast to get it all in the can, edit it, do the ADR, let it get a bit dusty, and then we'll put it out in a couple of years' time. It's a much kinder production cycle now.
Yeah, it's always best not to half kill your principal cast members, really, I find.
It depends.
Yeah. We were talking about the missing episodes earlier, and in 1998, the BBC came across the first known home recording of a Doctor Who episode, a video recording. And it's from the Space Pirates. Unfortunately, sod's law, it was episode 2, which was the only one they had in their midst already. So yes, sadly, but I mean, it does give you hope that other stuff might come up. I don't know if the two of you listen to Doctor Who podcast very much at all, but there's a rather fine Australian podcast where they were talking about a massive haul of old videotapes. They had a guy, I think it was in Sydney, and he was basically a hoarder. So, and to a level where he would go out to the shops, buy all the latest singles. They would never come out of their wrapper. They would just go into a box, and he had room upon room upon room upon room of tapes. So they reckon he just literally just constantly taped everything that was on TV. Now, unfortunately, they didn't quite get to the guy's house once he'd passed away in time, so some of the relatives had already carted off a whole bunch of... They'd emptied a room full of U-matic tapes, and they'd gone off to the local dump.
No.
But there's still a significant amount of tapes that they have taken off to go through now. So 42 to Doomsday is the podcast, which is Mark and Rob. And yeah, it'd be interesting to hear if they've got any sort of follow-ups on that.
So I have a question. This guy
Go
who did this, he's buying all these singles, and he's too he's too well off to actually have to listen to any of it. He's videoing all the stuff off the telly. He's got a house with room after room after room. He's clearly nuts. How's he making his money? How's he getting this house?
I don't know. But it's So it's stories like that do give you a modicum of hope that something will turn up. But obviously, the longer these things go on, it does feel like the likelihood of anything else coming back is getting slimmer.
Yes, it's been wonderful over the last 30 years. I remember when we would first read about these things in Doctor Who magazine in the 90s, that things were dangled carrots of hope. In the days before the internet, these things were just like myth and rumour. But since subsequently, so much... I mean, I was around when Tomb of the Cybermen was found and then released on VHS, and that was quite a revelation. The thing that's always disturbing about found episodes... and the audio, of course, was not available even then back in the 90s. Many of these audios hadn't been shared yet. Was that in your mind, you often assemble a better story from the screen grabs, the John Cura screen grabs, and the description or chunks of dialogue that would appear in Doctor Who magazine. One would think, oh, that looked Fury from the Deep. That looks so. Oh, you the Macro Terror. You would make the special effects yourself in your mind, and of course they're going to be far better than anything that was done in real life. Then, if they do find them, it can be nothing but a disappointment.
Target novels as well probably don't help with that, because your mind obviously has possibly a larger budget than 1960s.
Well, you know that old saying.
BBC.
That old saying that radio is better because the pictures are better. You know, it's a thing said by very, very old people, but you know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that piecing together of lost... The same thing used to happen with cult films, of course, in the days before the wide availability, is that you conjure up something in your imagination and you really turned out to be better than the real thing. Of course you did.
So I'm just to fill you in, Kev, on my personal journey with the Second Doctor. I have increasingly found his constant state of panic to be somewhat tiresome. And this episode 2 of this story begins with him going, oh, and then fainting. And I think it ends with him fucking up something to do with magnets and then fainting. Episode 6 begins with him going, oh, and fainting. So another reason I maybe didn't commit to doing the full 6 parts of this, in amongst my genuine desire to maintain a little piece of unknown mystery, was that I've really had it with the Second Doctor by this point. Now, that I know is a controversial opinion, because you ask any Doctor Who fan and they'll tell you, oh yeah, Pat Troughton was the best. I'm wondering where he ranks for you personally as a Doctor.
Well, because he was before my time, that phrase used by people who were seeing the show in real life, I came in with John Pertwee. I had been old enough to have Patrick Troughton on the black and white TV, but I was like a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, and so I was genuine, hiding behind the sofa. Cybermen episodes, I have the faintest, it must have been Tomb of the Cyberman, the faintest memory of being too terrified to see this as a very, very young child. So Pat was a thing that existed as a folk memory, and then that book that came out in 1972 or 1973, The Making of Doctor Who, by Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dix. I was one of the customers for that, aged 10 or 11, I can't remember, by 9 or 10 or 11 by then. So I got that. And so then I got up to speed with Pat Troughton. So he was a person I read about. I didn't see a Doctor Who, an actual episode with Pat Troughton in until in 1982 they did a run of repeats over, I think, the summer holidays or something like that. And they ran An Unearthly Child. They ran, is it called The Seeds of Death, Pat's story?
Yes.
Yes, they ran The Seeds of Death, and then they ran a couple of other Doctor stories. And so I saw Pat for the first time and absolutely loved him. I thought, oh, I see. Oh, yes, that's very clever. He was, because Bill Hartnell was really, really quite dull. And you could see hard to see how Dalek Mania and Who Mania had come about in 1965, watching that. But then seeing Pat, it was equally hard to understand why the programme had gone down and down and down in the ratings and then been threatened with cancellation about the time of the episodes we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Because Pat just seemed so captivating. But I think you're right, Ian, in small doses. Because he is so clownish, he's so gurning, I think, sometimes may have felt the need to overcompensate for what he didn't think was very good drama. And as we've also established, he was knackered a lot of the time. So being able to strike a balance and do justice to the work you're given may have been something that he will have come into work and said, "Oh, sod this, do you mind if I just do a bit of screaming and running? And I'll tell you what, I'll jump up in the air and grab my arse and we'll pretend some bombs are going off behind me. Can we do that?" Because I can see that being one of his choices. Because he also stands out amongst doctors as someone whose work outside of his 3 years on the show is distinguished, is, if he'd not done Doctor Who, you'd still be talking about Pat Troughton with all these roles he does. He doesn't do the Doctor in all his other roles. I mean, the same is the case with Bill Hartnell, as I now discover, because I watch Talking Pictures TV, and so I see Bill Hartnell in films from the 1950s, and I had no idea that he'd done so much work, because he didn't do any films after Doctor Who. Pat ranked as an impressive performer who I still think did some very, very good work in Doctor Who, but not necessarily 3 consistent years worth of.
What a fine answer. Thank you for that. We'll clip that and just put that out. That could be our Troughton retrospective episode. Job done. We can go to the pub. Mark, how are you finding it? We are obviously quite close to the end of the second Doctor now.
Yes.
But, are you still loving the journey? Are you still...
Well, it feels like we've reached a point in the journey where we've now seen the last of the, or I've now seen the last of the missing episodes.
I watched part 6.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. I started making notes for the quiz, and the episode just sort of ended without me noticing. But I feel like
it's always a good sign.
I feel like it was like that for everyone because it kind of ends with a bit of a whimper. But do carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's from here on in. It's a doddle, isn't it? It's all moving pictures, and so we still have one more story to go, which is a bit of an epic. Now, I did say a few episodes back that I was almost looking forward to the John Pertwee stories. Now, Kev, this is going to come as quite a shock to you, but historically, I've not been the biggest fan of Monsieur Pertwee. Yeah, again, obviously, that was your generation. You kind of latched onto him because he was your Doctor, and I feel like I've got the inverse of that because I'm a little bit younger. Tom Baker was my Doctor, so as you say, you've got that thing. Oh yeah, well, he was the guy before. So I don't think I would have seen him until they did the 5 Faces of Doctor Who on BBC Two in the lead up to Peter Davison coming on as the Doctor. So I think I'm kind of looking forward to it. I think it's I'm prepared to go in fresh and just give him a fair crack of the whip and just put my preconceptions to one side and see how we go. But I certainly, before we started this whole process of watching them all in order, I'd seen everything that was around, but you just sort of piecemeal and in bits and bobs. And I think the journey so far has given me a much greater appreciation for what William Hartnell did, being able to see the context and watching it all play out. And if anything, with Troughton, I feel like he's a superb actor, and there's no questioning that. But perhaps the quality of some of the stories that he had weren't as imaginative as what we had back in the very early days. So he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, I feel.
We've also got the usual caveat that this was only meant to be watched for 25 minutes once a week.
Yeah.
And, a lot of, if you watched 5 episodes or 6 episodes of EastEnders in one go, you might find and all I've got is Grant Mitchell because I stopped watching it when Grant left. But any performance on any level can become grating if you're immersed in it to a greater extent than you're supposed to be. And for 25 minutes, Troughton's energy and his role as the kind of he's not the audience identification character, that's the companions, but he as a child viewer, you are looking to him for your cues on is this perilous, should we be scared, is this bad, are you okay, are you going to be on top of this? And his constant level of sort of mild terror, I think, would have kept kids absolutely on the edge of their seats. It doesn't really do it for me, but sadly I'm not 7 anymore. I'm almost 9.
I think we've all got opinions of how the Doctors are served by the material they're given, because I've always been had to stand up for the actors in the 80s and thinking, oh, it could have been so much better if ... which is what you get all the time in the DVD commentaries. I mean, Janet Fielding and Peter Davison are pretty scathing about the programme they appeared in. They knew at the time what was ending up on the screen, and they just had to go with that, and so that's it is what it is, as the kids say.
I do find sometimes with Patrick Troughton, his performance is taken on to another level if he's got someone really good that he's up against. So you can kind of tell when he's really enjoying it and he's feeling like he's getting something out of it as well. The cast on this one, what do we feel? Ian, from your one episode viewing, what did you... To me, it feels like there's slightly different levels of realism being applied to the characters.
Yes, I mean, so the first person I saw in episode 2 who wasn't one of the TARDIS team was this sort of amazingly bouffant guy with this huge hipster moustache. In this sort of
Milo Clancy.
No, not Milo Clancy. He's the sound operator in the space station. And then you got, I believe the gentleman's name is General Hermack, who
yes,
is a very special performance.
Interesting factoid for you, Ian.
Shoot.
General Hermack, the actor, Jack May, was the voice of Igor in Captain Duckula.
Shut the front door.
Yes. Yeah.
So he would go on to find good work. That's nice.
Of course, yeah.
There was the guy, his number 2, who I believe the character's name was in fact Ian.
Yes.
Who looked very much like I imagine Tom Baker would have looked in 1969. Big sort of beaky nose and those eyes, and the hair wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
But,
I think it's about 1969 that Tom Baker appears in an episode of Isn't It Nearest and Dearest? Someone shared me the clip just the other day. Tom Baker's very first TV appearance, I think, and he does an entertaining porter at a railway station.
Oh yes, I've seen that. Yeah, it's very Tom.
Who else was it? So obviously there's Milo Clancy, and maybe we'll circle back to talking about that.
Yes, yeah.
There was Madeline Isigri, who was
yes.
I think in about a 3-minute sequence in episode 2, I wrote down, she seems nice, and then she's obviously guilty of everything. There's a cheeky look to camera that she gives, like, oh, I'm naughty.
Yeah. She does seem to be wearing something on her head that looks like some sort of sculpt of someone's bottom made out of silver. It's quite a curious
I don't know
look.
anyone whose bottom looks like that.
Well, I mean...
Yet.
Look in the mirror.
But I thought she was lovely. I felt all of the actors in this were certainly giving 100%, which has not always been the case.
No, it's just true.
So another level of the charm that I took away from this story was that enthusiasm, and they're making a show that it's a real outlier in terms of Doctor Who, certainly in terms of where we are in Doctor Who at the end of the 60s. They've actually thought to construct a story that is there to allow the regulars to have a bit of a breather or do other things. They're making something that they know is kind of outside the norm. But I think with that in mind, everyone just went about it in what I'm going to assume was a really good spirit. And that I think what they created, and we won't know until the episodes are unearthed in that skip in Australia, but it seemed really good. As a Doctor Who fan, you can see the shortcomings a mile off. It hasn't got much of the Doctor in it, and all he's doing is hiding in a cupboard, playing with some wires and talking about magnetism, and showing Jamie a little child's magnet, like Jamie, who incidentally is wearing what I've written down as a smashing blouse in this story. Jamie's never even seen a magnet before. They had magnets in wherever he's from. Good Lord, surely. Yeah.
Of course, this was filmed at the time where the space race was going on. So,
well, yes, and I've just been thinking about it. Is this not our last spaceships for quite a while? The War Games has got spaceshipy locations in, but of course it's also got war locations, and so it's slightly different. But this is we're travelling in space, and you've got the model shots, which once we get to 1970 and John Pertwee, we'll be living without those for a few years.
Yeah, we get the odd bit and every now and again, but it's very much earthbound for a lot of Pertwee.
We're not going to be going along corridors which people reviewing it will accuse of wobbling, even though we know they don't wobble.
No, quite. So I'm sure everyone would have been thinking about, the astronauts going to the moon, and it would have been in the zeitgeist. So I suppose it would have been quite a popular story for sort of embracing those sort of spacey themes.
And for the sort of sci-fi fan who isn't necessarily a Doctor Who fan because they like rockets and peril in space and this, that and the other. And we keep, or certainly I keep alluding to the kind of classic RKO Flash Gordon serials of the 30s or 40s and things like that. And this is much more of that kind of thing. So again, it's a very different approach to the show, which on this occasion may... And obviously it's not the best time to be bringing in new viewers when you're pretty much about to cancel the programme. But, it would have done that because it's doing a different job.
Yeah,
and again,
I can imagine.
Another thing is it's so bizarre to see how Season 6 is unfolding and the huge variety of tropes and stories and storytelling and locations and so forth. Coming off the back of Season 5, which was always a base under siege, we're back in this Hartnellian diverse storytelling year where literally anything can happen and you can go anywhere and tell, completely different types of story.
This feels like almost like a Star Trek, original series Star Trek story. Obviously, we didn't have Star Trek in the UK until, in fact, Star Trek, I believe, took over the slot that Doctor Who vacated before Pertwee came along. The
very thing that I was just about to scratch my head and work out when. I also was around, old enough to watch Star Trek. I watched the first episode of Star Trek around my friend Nick's house. So we're 7 or 8 years old watching that. And yes, I remember Star Trek starting then. I'm also thinking about how many spaceshipy things there were on TV. Jerry Anderson's space-bound things had all finished by this point, hadn't they? He's now doing Joe 90, and then the following year, the same year as John Pertwee does, he'll return with UFO, which is spaceships again. The Avengers would be the biggest of those sort of fantasy adventure things. It's just coming to an end too. They go off in a rocket at the end of it, I seem to remember. But yeah, there's not a lot of other spaceships knocking about in any of the stuff.
And is that
the rival stuff?
It for spaceships until we get to Star Wars?
Doctor Who notwithstanding, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, which doesn't start till 1979, that's spaceshipy. The 70s are quite light on sci-fi full stop, hence the impact of Star Wars when it finally comes around. You get Silent Running in 1973, and then I'm struggling to think of any... Oh, and Dark Star about the same time. I'm struggling to think of any spaceships to speak of through the 70s. And
on TV, we had Blake 7 and Space 1999.
Again, towards the end of the 70s. We've just had 2001. 2001 was 1968-69 and goes big into space. David Bowie's Space Oddity becomes a hit single to coincide with the space race as well. But in drama, on telly, not much. I think we're all also starting to realise that we're starting to see through these things. That's the reason why John Pertwee is Earthbound, because they realise with the incoming colour television, you will tell that models look crap. The conversations that must have been having had with Jerry Anderson along the lines of, we can't see the strings this time, Jerry, because colour TV, we had it in more recent years when we moved to HD TV, and now we're on 4K. The budgets have to go up when you can basically see everything you're trying to hide.
I think with 2001, we had kind of a spaceship kind of category killer, and it took cinema a decade to really circle back with Star Wars. With Doctor Who in particular, we're saying that this was kind of like the last roll of the dice for that kind of story for a long time. And part of that was the realities of how production would evolve moving into colour TV. Half of it, again, was this pitch of, let's just do Doctor Who but set it on Earth for about $3 bob a week instead of spending all this money on it. We'll get some cheap guy to do it who won't worry about money too much.
Well, they will have been looking at stories like The Invasion and Web of Fear, and there's a couple of others which have used Nicholas Courtney, and they use the stuntmen, and they use guns, and they use down-to-earth locations, and saying, doesn't this look better? We can do this with our budget. And they did. They, as you will discover in the subsequent episodes, you start to get great bang for your buck, and stuff shot on 16mm film on beaches and on locations that really stands the test of time in the way that a model shot doesn't, which is why we remake all the model shots for the Blu-rays these days.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that John Pertwee had lots of friends in the Navy from his war years, so that certainly helped them with the Sea Devils and acquiring a quite impressive array of Navy hardware to play with.
Yeah, and he liked fanning about with cars, hence the abysmal Who-mobile, which we have many years before we have to suffer.
Yes.
And the other thing, as a child watching the show and then going to school the next day and trying to play it in the playground, it's a lot easier mentally to replicate running through a quarry or running through a forest than it is to run through a spaceship. Because the more kind of pedestrian the locations are, the more universal it is. I remember one of the Davison stories I loved the most remains The Awakening, because it's set in a quiet English village, which are 10 a penny. And as a kid, that's wonderful. If you can have adventure happening in somewhere that ordinary and easily accessible, that's a great thing. So what they did in the 70s, probably by accident, was make something that I think kids could buy into a lot more, because it was more, it was their
relatable
experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly the notion of it being more scary because it's your planet being invaded. It's people coming to a recognisable location. So aliens coming from space and menacing it, which is the basis of, the Day of the Triffids and Quatermass and many other things. That wasn't really done in Hartnell and Troughton. They don't do much, apart from the invasion. It really stands out in that way. The Cybermen in front of St. Paul's is very much, you are being invaded, or me, the viewer, is being invaded in my home. And that is the vibe that Pertwee sticks with for 3 or 4 years.
Well, that, I think, owes a lot to the fact that the Cybermen, almost uniquely in the history of Doctor Who, were able to figure out Zone 1, Zone 2 cards and how the underground worked. So they were able to visit those landmarks economically, whereas the Daleks turned up and they were completely flummoxed by...
So that big chest unit wasn't actually any kind of life support. It was a very rudimentary early form of an Oyster card.
Yes, that's right. They could just sort of touch and go, and then they'd be on their way. But yeah, so I think it's time we're going to have to spend 2 minutes discussing Milo Clancy.
Yeah, I mean, we did touch on Jerry Anderson just now, and I feel he would be very much at home in Thunderbirds in more than one sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Visually stunning.
Yes, quite coiffured.
Very, very much so. I've never seen like an eyebrow wig before, but there's a first time for everything. I should get some of them. I look. I have got eyebrows. They're just very delicate.
Yeah.
But. So there was an accent happening.
There were multiple accents happening.
Sure.
Not necessarily good ones. It has to be said.
Consistently performed ones.
No.
So Milo Clancy, as I understand it, and you know what, I read the Target book when it came out. It was one of the very last ones. It had the Sylvester McCoy logo on it, which was thumpingly incongruous.
God, even the blind hate that logo.
Exactly. But I remember when I would have read that, and again I would have been maybe 12 or 13, I knew that Milo Clancy was this legendarily bad performance or character, which kind of informed how I read the book, which was very quickly with minimal attention just to get it done, because I'd spent £1.25 on the bloody thing. It might have been $1.50 by then. I don't know. People love minutiae. That's why they come to shows like this. But if you're that bothered about the price of a Target book in 1989, then get a life. I say. But yeah, so I knew it was going to be wearing, and I didn't have any problem with Milo Clancy in the one episode of this that I actually watched. But Mark, how was that experience for you, having done all 6 episodes of this?
I did find it a tad wearing, it has to be said. I think in our listener feedback, just to give you a bit of a spoiler, listeners, somebody, and I forget who it was, but I will find out later, suggested that possibly the cast weren't all necessarily sort of working to the same hymn sheet, if you like. So a variety of acting styles were employed, not necessarily ones that sort of gelled together particularly well. Hermack is very much a sort of very posh and very conservative and very straightforward, and I shall tell you what to do. And then you've got his second in command. He starts American, then he goes a bit sort of
Ian
crafty Cockney. Yeah.
He goes a bit RP. But
very much like the Jason Statham of the 1960s. You're trying to figure out what his accent is. And then Milo Clancy, well, good Lord. Now, because you dipped in episode 6, you won't have come across this whole plot twist with, I believe it's Marianne's father.
So I remember it intimately from my forensic experience with the Target book.
So
he's been in the cupboard for 20 years.
Effectively, Hermack and his guys are trying to stop the space pirates from breaking up these space stations and melting them down for profit. And Milo Clancy used to be in a partnership with this fella, and they found this mine and got that company up and running. And then Milo Clancy is suspected of murdering his partner, his business partner, and he's gone missing, and it's all very shady, and they just know that Milo Clancy must be the evil guy that's the mastermind behind all this, the space pirate himself. And his business partner's daughter is still running the show with the business, and she's the one you alluded to earlier, who was very lovely, with the slightly odd headwear. And it gets to a point where it turns out, as you suggest, she's in cahoots with the bloomin' space pirates. Old Cavan, who to me looks very much like Kevin Eldon. Do you remember Kevin Eldon?
Or a slightly younger J.R. Southall, perhaps.
Oh, no. Oh, dear, no.
It's certainly in the one screen grab they had in the recon I watched.
Yeah. So she's about to dob him in. She's decided she's going to mend her ways and become a goodie and tell on the baddies to General Hermack. So she does that, and then Caven turns around and says, "Oh, well, your dad's not actually dead. He's just in his study round the corner." I'm thinking, well, she obviously didn't look very hard for him if he's been in his own study all this time. He's been missing for years. What's that all about?
The base threshold is check your house thoroughly.
I'm having a slight flashback to Enemy of the World with the slightly incredulous people who've spent the last 5 years underground because Mexican Papa Lazarou Troughton has told them that there's been a terrible nuclear disaster above the ground.
One guy
Yeah.
tells you can't go outside, and all these people are like, fine, sure, I'm never going to question that.
Yeah.
Not even Colin, and he's a skeptic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, Colin.
Oh, Colin. So one thing I liked about Dom Isigri was their 1987 chart hit "Nothing Ever Happens," which I thought was remarkable. Again,
I went to school with Justin out of Delamitri.
Did you really?
Yes, I just thought I'd add my 2 pence to that. Totally irrelevant because someone's name sounded like another name. But Delamitri, kids at home, you won't remember there was a band called Delamitri in the 1980s and 90s. But Justin Curry, the lead singer, was at school in Kibworth in Leicestershire at the time. At the time was there too. And we probably were watching John Pertwee.
You see, so I make a crap joke, but you are here with your celebrity friendships to elevate it into something almost, I would say, worth listening to, and that is the gold of this podcast.
Well, there you have it.
Yes, I feel we may have reached the end of our exciting discussion about the Space Pirates, unless you have anything else that you'd like to...
Well, I'd just like to say that I greatly now look forward to watching The Space Pirates, starring Patrick Troughton, and I look forward to being welcomed back in a few years' time when we get to the Pirate Planet.
Yes, let's do that.
Upon which I am quite the expert.
We'll stick a pin in that, and then we'll...
You can be our pirate episode regular. Which does also kind of loop you into Curse of the Black Spot if we get that far.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Okay, well, I feel it's time for us to rate this mother and give it a score out of 10. So I'm going to come to Ian first. What would you like to give the Space Pirates?
Wow. Well, so on the basis of the excellent model work, and I'm not joking...
no, they were really good.
Those very flat spaceships look really good, certainly on film.
The ones with the little noses on, they were pretty cool too.
Launching out the little minnow ships.
Yeah,
Again, I think the performances were, whether you found them soothing or not, I think everyone was giving a certain level of enthusiasm.
110%.
Indeed. And the story, while obviously nonsense that we could drive holes through with a snowplow, was never designed to be anything else. And it was designed to be watched in 25-minute episodes every week.
Yes, yes.
And it was very artfully and carefully crafted to be a 6 weeks of content that wouldn't impact the regulars who needed either a lie down and a cup of tea, or they had to be in a quarry somewhere being shot at by the one of the many armies we'll encounter very soon. So based on the absolute genuine sense of charm I got from episode 2, I'm going to give this one a hypothetical 8.
Okay. Kev.
Well, it's obviously unfair for me to judge something that I haven't seen. However, in order that Robert Holmes's average should never dip too low, nor neither should Patrick Troughton's average be allowed to dip too low. And because of the nostalgia of finally getting some spaceships and then having to live without spaceships for the next 4 years or so, it's got to have something going in its favour. But all in all, 6 episodes of filler, I don't think really merit more than 6 out of 10.
I think that's very fair. Okay, well, it's my turn now. I am going to say it's not terrible. I do wonder whether we get a bit more appreciation for it if we could see the blooming thing. It's not the greatest. I'm going to give it a bang average 5. So, Ian's giving me a bit of a look.
Bit of side-eye, listeners. Bit of side-eye. There's going to be a duffing up in the playground after this one.
Oh dear, oh no. That's what we thought of the Space Pirates. Let's have some listener feedback.
I've got mail.
All right, so first up from me, we have heard from the Doctor Who show down in Australia. It's our mate Rob. Hello, Rob. And Rob says, one thing I can say is the Target novel reads just fine. It reads like it's the novelisation of a fast 4-parter rather than a 5-parter. I think he means a 6-parter. From what we have of it, feels like a bit of a drag. I highly commend the novel to everyone. So he's a fan of that one. Thank you, Rob. Next up, we've heard from David Kitchen, also from the Doctor Who show. And David says, I've long defended the Space Pirates, and I'm convinced that the worst episode only existing has really hurt this story's reputation. Episode 1 is a fun action episode with pirate raids on beacons ending in a big explosion. Episode 2, the story stops whilst we give all the background exposition and get characters where we need them, with a distinct lack of pirates. From there, it's a decent adventure. Cavan is a good Holmes villain, and Dervish a strong, flawed Holmesian character, and a rare 1960s female villainess in Madeline Isagiri. There's great model work and lots of space adventure. I've always quite liked it. Oh, thanks, David. And next up, from me, we have heard from the wonderful Simon Moore. We're getting all the Australians on this one. Simon says, I've always had a soft spot for the surviving episode. I've listened to the audio a few times. It does sort of drift off in the last couple of eps. One might say it loses the plot. Some good stuff going on, but it never reaches its potential. Now, I think that's a very fair summary there, Simon. Thank you. Next up, yet another Australian. It's Luke Sims Jenkins. And Luke says, this story sounds like it could be fun to watch. It's not that fun to listen to, which from what we have of it feels like a bit of a drag. I highly commend the novel to everyone. Oh, so that's another one for Uncle Terence's novel there. Thank you, Luke. Now, you're not going to guess where our next contributor comes from, are you? Where do you think it could be?
I'm hearing didgeridoos.
You're not wrong, mate. It's bloody Philip Edney from the Sirens of Audio. And Philip, sorry, Philip. Philip says, I know, it's awful. I'm so sorry, Philip. I do apologise. This is probably the least well-known of all the missing stories, and unfortunately I find it utterly forgettable. I know I've read the novel at least once, I've listened to the BBC soundtrack several times, and yet if you asked me to tell you the story, I would really struggle. I've watched the one surviving episode many times, and that's a bit blah, and I know it changes to an underground location later on, but really, no idea. I'd always hoped it was like Enemy of the World, and the one episode we have is the worst, and everything else is brilliant. And in hope, I asked Wendy Padbury this question. She looked me in the eye over a lovely glass of sparkling and went, nah, it doesn't get any better. So let's find some other stuff first. And that's from Philip. Thank you, Philip. We now have the wonderful Jess Jerkovic. And Jess says, to be brief, it's too slow, not particularly well cast, too many newfangled jumping grasshoppers from one particular character. I think he means Milo. The music can't quite manage dramatic weight, and no convincing villain has ever been named Maurice, in my opinion. You're not wrong.
They call
Thank
him
you, Jess.
Maurice because he speaks of the pompousness of love.
Yeah, some people call him the Space Cowboy. Yeah. Thanks, Jess. Next up, we've heard from the Too Broad and Too Deep podcast. Hello, guys. Episode 3 of this was what broke me in my one Doctor Who episode a day marathon under lockdown. There's no sense of wonder I have for it like I do for similar telesnapless stories like Season 3. They got some right cowboys in to make this story. And that's from Anthony. Thank you. We've heard from Electronic Dan. Dan says, it's enjoyable space opera, but Milo Clancy with his awful accent is annoying. Yes, there seems to be a fairly consistent comment about Mr. Clancy. Sorry, Milo. Next up, we've heard from Rob Keeley. Rob says, I think that if we could see the whole thing, it might turn out to be a much better story than we thought. The Enemy of the World was judged for years on a single surviving episode and turned out to be totally different from its reputation. Dare I say it, better than Web of Fear. Yeah. Next up, we've heard from Michael Donahue. Michael says, The Cure for Insomnia. Well, I don't think he's pulling any punches there. Yeah, not a fan. Yeah. We've also heard from Ian Tempest. And Ian says, based on one surviving episode, I would like to see more. Oh, that's a positive spin. We've also heard from Troy Ryan Wood. Troy says, nowhere near as bad as people think, but if all of Troughton was suddenly discovered, it would still probably be down towards the bottom, just because it's a bit too long, doesn't have any aliens, and it's very much a product of the times. He goes on to say, like Ambassadors, it's a product of a narrow time window when seeing astronauts sitting in tiny capsules performing silent spacewalks and closely monitoring fuel consumption was riveting stuff. Lacking video hurts this story more than most just because it's such a slow burn. Yeah, I think they've got a pretty decent take on that. Thank you, Troy. And finally from me, we have heard from David Moss. David says, Doctor's penultimate story? Check. Mining? Check. Donald G? Check. Peladon? Oops, no, that's Pertwee. Now, if you didn't know, Donald G, who plays your mate Ian, he's also in The Monster of Peladon.
Oh.
Plays Eckersley.
Oh, of course.
Yes. So David goes on to say, let's see, Costello seems to be channeling Jimmy Stewart throughout the story to give voice to Milo Clancy. Maybe old Gordon watched How the West Was Won one too many times. Who knows? But it is a weird acting choice. And he continues, this was JNT's first story. That's right, yeah. He was a floor assistant, I believe, in this story. So that's his first contribution. So I guess we have the Space Pirates to thank for that. That might be damning it with faint praise. Story's a Doctor Light slog and a bit of a cipher. I suspect, Dave, it isn't the biggest fan of this one. Thank you, guys. Next up, we have heard from the legendary Andy Moore.
I've got to keep the monster happy with the concertina.
Well, that's nothing less than I would expect from the musical genius that is Andy. I think he tied it. We were obviously on the same wavelength, because when I asked for feedback on this, when I asked if it was an epic space opera or a load of old pugwash, and I think Andy has given us his answer, at least.
I think can we just play that again, because I want to get up and have a little bit of a dance.
I'll send you the file, and then you can just have it on a loop.
Thanks, I'll make it my ringtone.
Lovely. Ian, who have you heard from?
So I just had a tweet in from Justin Curry, who says, Ian, that was a great joke about Delamitri, and it deserved better. I've also heard from Fraser Gregory, who is well known for messaging Doctor Who podcasts, but he's kept it brief on this occasion. He says, "This is a story very much hamstrung by what little we have left of it. If it were returned, or when it gets animated, I'm confident it would have the Enemy of the World style reappreciation. As things stand, best way to enjoy it is Uncle Terence's page-turner of a target." James H., hello James, says, "I'm very biased against it, as the physics is so awful, but dear God, it takes a long time to go nowhere with painful accents and huge plot holes. But I want an animation or a BBC recon so I can re-evaluate it." Sounds like it's going to be facing a bit of an uphill battle there. Quillpen says, "It's a load of old pugwash, 6 episodes too long, but the cupboard was bare for backup scripts, so this and War Games. Although War Games is a classic, we're not talking about War Games yet. Hold your horses. War Games is a classic with no let-up or sagging. Ask if it was made today with original scripts, they would cut. So the sense I'm getting, Mark, is that you've sent me all those listener feedbacks that are less than 100% on side with the story.
Oh, Fraser likes it.
So Southern Man says, "Based on the one remaining episode, hard to tell."
Yeah, well, that's sitting on the fence, and he's not saying he hates it. He's not saying he loves it. Yeah.
Tim from the Missing Episodes podcast, hello Tim.
Hi Tim.
Says, "You can't space polish a space turd, but you can space roll it in glycerol trinitrate." He's quite correct. Jamie Bate says, "I find it bizarre." Actually, he's got an amazing his little photograph. It looks like Max Verstappen wearing a Fourth Doctor scarf. Jamie,
maybe he is.
Let's go for that again. "I find it bizarre, and that carries it into the don't know what to make of it category for me. I don't think it turning up would necessarily make it a classic, but I could at least see what exactly they're going for. Cavern is a right nasty piece of work, and the music is weird too, but I kind of like it. Would be nice to see it, basically. It's the last of the missing stories I've tried getting into, and I'm still curious about it." Yeah. Michael Storm, I hope you're feeling better, although by the time this episode goes out, you'll be feeling a lot better. The Space Pirates is a bit unfairly maligned, I think. Yes, it is probably a bit too long, something true of most Troughton six-parters. And isolating the regulars from the action early on is not a good move, especially since it takes until well over the halfway mark of Part 1. The story clearly relies on the visuals and model work to help tell the story, something that does translate well to audio only. I think he means doesn't. The surviving episode in isolation doesn't help sell the story. No titular pirates and barely present regulars. However, there is some... He means that. However, there are some good characters, and we do get an impression of the vastness of space and how isolated you are when in the wild black yonder. That's a good name for a Doctor Who story there. The novelisation proves it isn't a bad story, it just needed tightening up. David Brizuela says, "The one story I can't defend." Which is unfortunate because he's a lawyer. He's probably not. I don't know. Max Schlimmer.
He's actually a defender for Derby County.
Oh, really? That explains almost everything. Max Schlieber says, "Like the Hammer film Moon 02, Kubrick's 2001 had a major influence on all sci-fi from about 69 to 71. Not necessarily for the best." Richard Donlan struggled to get through it last time. Lord Steerforth says, "The best thing about it is the superb music." Eric White says, "Listen to the audio, enjoyed it. Part 2 is weird, but enjoyable weird. Having a great TARDIS team helps." And finally, Joe Halliday, "Pugwash, I'm afraid. Never as yet managed to listen to this one all the way through. Just pure banal, without the B."
Ooh. Ouch.
Harsh but harsh.
Well,
thank you everyone.
Okay.
Thank you for your thoughts. Thanks for getting in touch.
Yes, Kev
Well,
Who have you heard from?
I've heard from Kieran at KJ Evans 2, who gives us the snoring emojis, zuz, zuz, zuz. Says, Dudley's Space Choir is at least interesting. I didn't get to hear Dudley's Space Choir, of course.
It was reminiscent of the music from the Ice Warriors for me.
All right. Michael H. at Big Orange Mikey says it's a decent attempt at a space opera. The orphan episode isn't the best sample of the story, which seems to be a common conclusion all round. Now, Beeblebrox Co. at Beeble Pete has said, I adore space pirates. My first were Crimson Jack and Jolly in the Star Wars comics from 1977. Anime's Harlock and Emeraldas are the royalty of the genre, I think, but Rack and Xanax Captain are great too. Robert Holmes' effort is fun but clumsy. Cavan and Co. seem really low on style. Well, there's some context for us. There's a whole load of space pirates knocking around. There's space pirates in the X-Men that I used to read way back in those days as well. This isn't Beeblebrox speaking, this is me speaking, by the way. But yeah, there have been a lot of space pirates. It of course, is going to be a very, very popular theme in science fiction. We haven't started to list all the space pirates that we've come across in the world, but thank you, Beeblebrox, for reminding us that basically this is the least good space pirates there's probably ever been. Remember that I'm the guy who watched Pirate Planet, which has the best space pirate in Doctor Who history.
Mr. Fibuli!
fabulous character, really brilliant design as well. But anyway, that's years ahead. Anthony Carroll at Carol Anthony, you've thought about that one, says, a rare case of feel can't comment as so much missing and always struggle to realise story in my puny human brain. But Ep 2 is zuz, 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 zuz. Reading tweets is really hard because the words you've missed out are the words that I really feel the need to put back in to make it sound like I've not just had a stroke.
Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad story, but Anthony Carroll is a huge, huge fan of the missing episodes, and he's obsessive about them. So for him to be not particularly in awe of this is, damning with faint praise, I would say.
Yes. Richard Smith, at Richard Smith, says, I watched The Recon and quite enjoyed it. Sure, no two guest actors seem to have read the same script or are on the same page, and the TARDIS crew are phoning it in, but it's still a lot of fun, and there's lots and lots of space. No hooks, yo-ho-hos, or bottles of rum, though. And they're very true. I mean, put pirates in the title, and you are raising the level of expectations for certain, shall we call them tropes?
Let's call them tropes.
Yeah.
That then don't arrive. 26 glorious years at 7 up 6389. And I think there's a tale to be told there of one of my favourite TV shows, which began about the same time as ours. But back to the subject of your tweet, you've said, far more engaging than its relatively poor reputation had led me to believe. Plenty of twists and turns, culminating in a fairly pacey final episode with some neat incidental music, particularly the ethereal sections by soprano Mary Thomas, and some of the finest model work to date. We're getting a lot of thumbs up for whatever model work we're able to see.
They were cracking models, I have to say.
And there you go, name drop for soprano Mary Thomas. Who else knew that? James Yoder at Chameleon72 says, I enjoy old-timer Milo Clancy, Space Prospector.
Well, there's always one.
Nick Goodman at NickGoo9004 says, cracking good tale. Full of twists, excitement, and the kind of offbeat, delightful characters Robert Holmes excelled in. I hope they find it all! ! Nick, I think, is reviewing the Target book more than the series. Because, it would seem that the story we have and the TV show we end up with may be two different things.
Very possibly.
Jeff Murray at That Jeff Murray says, only in our crazy show could the best bits of the story called The Space Pirates, and there are several good bits, take place in a cave. Got to love it. And finally, Sleepy Bird at The Epic Groke says, one of my favourite Troughtons, want it recovered as much as the Daleks' master plan or the massacre. 2 exclamation marks.
Good Lord.
I mean, Sleepy Bird, you want everything recovered. That is a given.
I mean, that's fair enough.
I don't know, prepare yourself for a disappointment from the evidence of our ears today. It would seem that nobody else has got their hopes that high.
Well, we're very appreciative of everyone for their feedback, and if you would like to comment on a future story, all the various ways and means will be listed over our end credits. Before we say goodbye to Kev, we are going to do some recommendations.
Oh, lovely.
Kev, what have you been enjoying that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Do you know what? It's another podcast. I'm sorry to take us away from listening to this podcast to listen to another, but if you've not listened to Richard Osmond and Marina Hyde's The Rest is Entertainment...
Oh, it's fantastic.
...and you have an interest in the media, then it is the go-to. I usually say, and I hate to do a disservice to our own podcast that we're currently doing, but I usually say that I'm not a person for the two folks just winging it in a podcast. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the scripted, planned, research, laboured over for years. Marina Hyde and Richard Osman simply sit down and simply appear to know everything about a subject that I'm riveted in. So The Rest is Entertainment, Marina Hyde and Richard Osman.
It is a cracking podcast. Thank you for that, Kev. I am going to recommend a very new series. It's one I've come to more recently. It's called Twin Peaks. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Twin Peaks, Mark.
Yeah. So
1989 has just rang. It did like its statements back.
So it's set in the northwest of the United States of America. It's the work of a particular gentleman called David Lynch and his friend Mark Frost. And it's just fantastic. I do remember watching the first series way back when it was on BBC Two, back in the 90s. And I must admit, back in the day, once we found out who had killed Laura Palmer, my interest waned a bit because it seemed to sort of, drop off a bit. No. Yes, I know. Ian is a big fan of season 2.
It does become very variable in the writing. Some writers seem not to get David Lynch while delivering their episodes.
Yeah. Now, that said, I decided, having heard my esteemed colleague Ian talking at great length about it on another podcast. Great length. It's about time I revisited it. So I have watched Season 1, Season 2, the Blue Rose fan edit of Fire Walk With Me, which I think is about 3 hours.
How delightful.
And the Return, as it's called, which is the 3rd season that came out in 2017. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is bonkers, balmy, entertaining, funny, scary, mad.
And can I just add, I have completed a new book. I've just done my latest colouring book. It's Cult TV colouring book. It's not even out yet, but it just went to the printers. And it features Twin Peaks, amongst others. It also includes Doctor Who, which features all the Doctors, and 20 other shows from Red Dwarf to Ghostwatch.
Marvellous. I better get my red felt tips out then. Ian, what can you recommend for us?
I'll be honest, I'd forgotten we did this segment.
Oh, you plum.
I know, right? What a fool. I'm very much... Enjoying is almost the wrong word, but I'm reading the Salman Rushdie memoir, Knife, which is all about him being attacked. And I'm finding it, obviously, phenomenally good because it's written by Salman Rushdie. But in particular, the chapter where he sort of addresses the immediate medical aftermath of the event and the first 2 weeks of his recovery and what condition he was in. And I was reading it and really struggling and thinking, I don't know if I've got it in me to read these details, read this story. And then I thought, what therefore must it have been like for him at the time, a 75-year-old man, to have had the resolve and the strength and the will to come back from that and live through that experience that I was only struggling to read about. So it's a phenomenal story of obviously overcoming adversity and resilience and I suppose, and this is going to sound like a bit of a cliche, but the power of the love that was, I think, his only real motive to kind of get better and keep going. Just jaw-dropping.
It's 3 very different things for you to check out there. Before we say goodbye, Kev, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to tell our listeners about what you've got going on at the moment?
Yes, well, my latest book, Richard III, the graphic novel, is my fourth of my Shakespearean graphic novels. You'll find it on Amazon and everywhere, and I'd urge you to buy that, because the first one that I've done, which is aimed at younger kids. It's aimed at 7 to 12-year-olds, but grown-ups will enjoy it too. And if anybody wants to learn how to make comics at my hands, I'm doing my comic art masterclasses at quite a number of places. You'll find them on my website, kevfcomicartist.com, and I'm working at book festivals and art centres, including Northern Ireland. I'll be going to in August.
Nice.
And North, South, East and West. And you can make a comic with me in a morning or an afternoon. Again, it is mostly 8 to 12-year-old kids that will be there, but grown-ups regularly turn up to my classes and don't go away disappointed.
Excellent. Well, I shall put some links in our show notes, so if anyone out there is interested, they'll be able to check it out. So thank you once again. And, well, next time we've got something of a 10-part epic to deal with in the War Games.
No, it is you who are very... I can't do it. I'm so excited for this one, Mark. I literally can't wait to talk about the War Games. Oh...
Featuring the Scottish Falsetto Sock Puppet Theatre as Easter eggs on the DVD from 10 years ago.
So that's it for this episode. So join us next time when we will be looking at the War Games.
Bye.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagof@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback. Or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.